Hello and welcome back to Wisdom in Action, the podcast where we explore what it takes to bridge the gap between knowing and doing, because that's where the real wisdom is born. I'm Austra Putnina, Brazilian's coach and podcast strategist, and I created this space to have honest conversations with real experts and bring you practical insights you can apply, not just think about. Today, we are joined by Maria Costanzo Palmer. I hope I said it right. A best-selling author who grew up in one of America's most iconic Italian restaurants. With over 20 years of experience as a speaker, storyteller, and passionate home cook, Maria turned her life story into a powerful message of resilience, proving that dreams can be made real with heart, hustle, and honesty. Maria, welcome to Wisdom in Action.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Austra. It's good to be
It's
here.
a pleasure to have you on. So to start us off, what is one piece of wisdom that changed everything once you started applying it?
Um, I think for me, it's really whenever my life started to fall apart that I was able to get it to come back together. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So I grew up in one of America's top 10 Italian restaurants during the 80s through the early 2000s. It was called the Prima Donna Restaurant in a little area outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania called McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania. And things were going incredibly well for my family and I. My dad bought a failing business. He turned it into this hotspot restaurant. We had celebrities, sports stars, broadcasters, you name it. Anybody who was anybody in the US and even abroad was coming to our restaurant in this very unlikely little place. And one day that all flopped because whenever I was 20 years old, I worked for my dad and I received a knock on our family's door, and it was the federal government looking for my father. And he was the subject of a federal grand jury investigation, which basically in the United States means that whenever somebody else is being investigated, in order to lessen their sentence, they're asked who else they might know that may have some sort of criminal type background. So then that way they can lessen that person's sentence and go after the other person. So that's how my dad's name kind of fell into the mix. He had never done anything wrong or was against the law at all. He actually helped completely transform the community of McKees Rocks, and the economy of McKees Rocks has never been the same since he left or whenever he was there. And it was really at that particular moment, whenever my family became the subject to a very public federal investigation, that it turned my entire way of thinking around. And it completely broke me. I had lots of mental health challenges. I moved 3,000 miles away to Los Angeles, California, which is the whole other side of the United States, to try to forget about my problems. But they ended up following me, like they always do. And it really took the wisdom of a gambling, swearing, passionate nun who started an organization called Get on the Bus to bring children to visit their incarcerated parents for Mother's Day and Father's Day, to really help me to see that what had happened to my family was not necessarily a liability, but a blessing. And I could use my own story to help to inspire other people and to give back. And so really that is the wisdom that I'd like to impart on everybody, is that even in your darkest moments, sometimes those are the moments that give us the most purpose, for sure.
What can allow to see that when you're in it? Because I assume as you were going through it, it wasn't the first thought that came in your mind that, oh,
So
this is a blessing.
no, it certainly was not a blessing. That being said, I would not want to repeat it either.
Yeah,
These hard things that happen to us, they are hard for a reason. They are not something whenever they're happening to us that we're jumping up and down and saying, yes, I won this lottery or this
yeah.
raffle. Um, you know, we're not downplaying the severity of that, but honestly, it took me stripping down my own self, not worrying about the guilt and the shame that I was carrying that I thought others perceived about me. I always say that whenever I was in Los Angeles, I'm a very friendly person. And in LA, whenever I was feeling my most down and out, I would tend to stare at the ground whenever I was walking because I didn't want to make eye contact with people. I didn't want to say hello or open my mouth because I thought that people could tell just by looking at me that there was something wounded about me. And I know now, having gone what I've gone through, that couldn't be further from the truth, right? We can't just look at somebody and say, this is a wounded person or this person is not worthy of my attention for XYZ. We all have those scars and those wounds, but we all have some really wonderful things about us too. And I think it was just the realization of what the families in particular that we were serving and Get on the Bus taught me. And a lot of those families had a much rougher background than I ever did. I was very blessed to have a nice, middle class, upper middle class, whenever my parents started to do very well, upbringing. And many of the families that we dealt with and Get on the Bus, it was much the opposite. They were born into poverty. They lived in poverty their entire lives. They were dealing with other outside factors in the community, things like hunger and crime, and just trying to hold things together and having multiple generations of people living in small spaces and not being able to provide in the high cost city of Los Angeles the way that they would like to. So understanding from their perspective that, hey, if they were able to go on and to do some amazing things and still to have the love of their family, the love of themselves, and still persevere, that should make me realize that I can also do it. And I think that that was the real turning point for me. So, sometimes it takes that outsider's perspective or point of view to really realign us whenever things happen that really rock our world, but we have to listen. And sometimes it's not just in words, we have to listen to the signs that are going on around us too.
What were some of the things that you learned about yourself as you were going through those, I assume it at least months, if not years, of those experiences?
One thing that I learned about myself is that I have a hard time accepting news that maybe isn't the most brightest or cheeriest. I had also a hard time of the thought of how other people would perceive me and my family, that people in general might think less of me, that I may have, in the process of all of this, let other people down, or my family may have let other people down. I know now that all of those things are not true, and those were more issues that I needed to overcome, not things that were put on me. Um, but it was hard to kind of see through the trees at that time. And I think coming out the other end, one of the most wonderful things I've learned, and it could also be, as we age, we get more wisdom, right? And I've learned now that really we are all our own pilots in our own journey, right? So
Mm.
if something brings you joy, but it might disappoint somebody else that's close with you, or a family member or a friend, our life is very short, and you have to think about things that are going to enrich you. And just so you are pushing forward with your goals and trying to be the best person that you can be, you cannot please everybody. So sometimes the displeasure with somebody is just going to happen, and they're going to have to learn how to accept it. Just like you might not agree with somebody else's life decision, but it's their life, it's their circus, it's their monkeys, it's their journey. And I think that that's been the greatest gift for me because Now, whenever I act on something, I'm not worried about what this person will think or how this person's going to perceive me or what somebody else will say. I'm only worried about, does this bring me joy? Is this something that I would like to pursue? Is this going to help me to be the best version of me? And if the answer is yes to all of those questions, regardless of what the outside world thinks of me, I'm going to do it. And that's just how it is.
With this, actually, I think this is really important for us to dive a bit deeper into about that, what others think of us, paying so much attention to that, people pleasing also coming with that. Because I know that for me, it was like one of the hardest things to actually change or overcome. Like I remember like one of my friends was doing kind of like weekly workshops, and I would go to support her. But at the time, I was like, I'm not interested in that topic. I don't really need it, but I felt like I had to go because that's, and I would grow up being the peacemaker. I'm always there to make peace and make everybody happy and the whole thing. And I remember I had like one of the people in my life tell me that, well, if you don't want to go, just don't go. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean don't go? It wasn't even a concept. I was like, okay, I still need to go. I need to plan my day around it and kind of things like that. I didn't even consider like, okay, it's an option for me not to go because I was like, well, I'm like her friend. She says that every time that I'm there, she feels much better, more like comfortable and to present and I'm like, I have to be there. But it wasn't, and like for me, I would be in a place where I wouldn't even consider my needs and what I wanted. I would be more so like, oh, they need me, or they said this, so I just have to be there. So it took like, long story short, I just said that I can't show up that week. Well, through went through the whole journey in myself emotionally and mentally and that whole thing, but then I never went back to it. And there was no issues around it as well, but it felt like such a big, hard thing to do. Even like with putting yourself first, even if when you know what you want, I think a lot of times we don't act on it or we don't communicate it, especially when it comes to other people that are involved, especially the closer people. How did you navigate it? What do you have any advice for people who are going through that? They might see that, oh, I might be neglecting myself or what I want to do, especially when they actually know what that is, but they feel like I don't think I'm there yet to put myself first or do what I want.
Yeah, so that is such a hard thing because I am exactly like you, a people pleaser by nature, and I fight against it all the time because that's just that my natural inclination is to give to other people and to be very generous with my time. And it's a wonderful way to be, and there is certainly a time and a place for it. You know, yes, if your friend is doing this kind of as a one-off, should you go and support it, even though it may not be exactly something that you're interested in? Absolutely. But to make a very regular commitment of something that's once a week for a certain number of hours, we only get so many hours within a day and so many hours within a week. And oftentimes, what happens just with anxiety in general, and I can say because I have so much of it, I'm willing to share it with anyone who would like to take some of my anxiety. But what happens with anxiety is the what if becomes much larger than the actual. So, what I mean by that is our thought process and your situation with your friend, you probably thought, well, if I don't go, what if that means other people won't go? Or what if she feels that she won't be as supportive or she won't be as comfortable and then she won't feel as successful and, she'll be saddened and this will hurt our relationship and all of these other factors that play in, many of which, probably 90 to 95% of them, are just manufactured and fabricated in our heads. What I would argue on the flip side is that your friend would want the best for you as well, and would want you to be pursuing things that are motivating and exciting and wonderful. And yes, there is a time and a place to come together to support one another. There is certainly a space for that, and not your entire life is not all about taking. It's certainly mostly about giving, but it cannot also be all about giving, because whenever it starts to be all about giving, eventually, whether or not you're going to say it out loud, you will start to feel resentment. You will start to feel burnt out. You will start to feel like you are the only person that is doing things for other people and they are not reciprocating. You will start to feel some internal anger. You will also start to feel some guilt and shame because you can't be everywhere at every place. And you're going to also start to feel like your life is really all about other people. And then you're going to look down the road 5, 10 years from now and say, hey, I wish I would have pursued this opportunity to be a podcast host. I wish I would have written that book. I wish I would have opened up this business. I wish I would have taken this trip while I could. But sometimes time slips away from us. So the best advice that I would give to somebody else is, yes, you want to be there for people as much as you are able to be. But I don't know if you've read any of the Rachel Hallis books, but one of the things that she says in deciding whether or not to take something on is, if it is not a hell yes, then it is a no. And I think about that often because so many opportunities at this point present to me. I've gotten offers to work as a grant writer at other organizations, to name my salary. And it's just not what I want to do at this particular moment in time. I have young children. I have a very illustrious career with my book and some speaking events and cooking events that I do that bring me a lot of joy and help me to enable to kind of give my dad a lot of hope and joy. And that is on my forefront at this moment. I don't know, 10 years down the line, maybe would I be interested in taking on more grant writing clients? Possibly. But right now is not that time for me. And I recognize that. I'm at peace with that. I'm very upfront with that. And I think that people appreciate that for sure, whenever you can be honest about what your own truth is.
And I think it's also another thing that I realized another time, like a few years ago, when I was about to go on a walk, and I had like messages from one of my friends who needed some help or support with something she was going through. And I remember thinking, oh, so this is what it means when you take care of yourself first and then you can actually show up for others. It doesn't work the other way around. Because if I didn't take care of myself, if I didn't even like do simple things as going on a walk or something like that, that is for me and that is helping me to be my best or become better or just be present with myself, then I wouldn't really have that space or capacity to be there for others. So that's where even with I call myself recovering people pleaser.
I love that.
with with the people pleasing, one thing that I realized is, well, initially what happened was that I had this like belief that I'm not good enough. And that's where like through helping others, that's how I got like some sense of like, oh, I'm good. I'm good. But then it gets to the point where now it's kind of like, well, that's who you are. You're the person who is always there for it's kind of like your job kind of thing. But like it doesn't matter how you feel or what you want. It's about like being there for others. And then like you get to the point where you see that, oh, this is not working. I need to change something, and I'm starting to neglect myself. And like what you said, have like some resentment towards others as well, even though it's not their fault. It's just like I wasn't setting my own boundaries. I wasn't sticking to them, and I wasn't communicating them. And after that, it's like you start to take care of yourself, and then you see how you can show up for others better, and also have more energy and presence for them because you know you have taken care of yourself. It's really interesting that the journey that we go on when we get some answers, where I'm pretty sure that even like 5, 10 years down the line, probably there will be even more layers to it. But it's something that that balance to find, it can be tricky, especially when you go through different seasons where like there's busier seasons, then there's less busy, or some other people might be going through something where they really need you. How do you navigate those in your life?
I think it's really a challenging balancing act, right? Especially being a mother of young children. My husband has his own business and he travels heavily. I travel pretty heavily as well for the book and some of the cooking opportunities. And I also work part-time as a grant writer here in the New Jersey area. So it certainly is a balancing act, but it's really a day by day trying to figure out how to make all of the puzzle pieces fit. And sometimes we do really well with that, and other times it's a big collapse. And whenever that collapse comes, we are really blessed to have wonderful family and friends that will step in and kind of swoop in for us. But on the flip side of that is we know that those people, we would do the same thing for them when their times come, because their times do come as well. And, I did a lot of reflection, especially during the pandemic. And one of the things that I realized is that in my life, I'm very friendly and I love to spend time with people who enrich me. But I thought about, I have certain friends in my life, or at least had certain very close friends in my life that I had a great time with whenever I was out with them. Everything was fantastic. We were laughing. It was just, the best kind of scenario. But it was always a struggle. I was always the one that was initiating plans, always. The plans would always have to be by that other person's location, no matter what. There would always be a small window of time, where they had 20 minutes between, pickups and drop-offs for one of their kids. And, it felt very much like they were filling their day and their time, and I was the person to kind of execute it. Um, I really took a stand back on a lot of those friendships, not because I don't enjoy them and they don't enrich me, because they do. And those folks, they're very wonderful people. And, if they needed anything in their life, I would be there to help and to support them. But the fact that it just wasn't reciprocal, I had to come to the realization that I'm putting in so much time and effort for somebody that would never put in half the effort for me. And so I think the best advice that I could give on this situation is kind of do an inventory of your life and figure out those people that enrich you and that are very giving of their mind, spirit, time. And then whenever you fill your day with those types of people, it doesn't feel obligatory. Whenever you go and support somebody at a concert or you go to somebody's first Holy Communion, even, if they're living a little far away, because you know that this is the type of friendship that's going to sustain, or relationship that's going to sustain over time. Now, that being said, I mean, there's only so many limits to what you could do, right? There are certainly going to be toxic people that we can't cut out of our lives, whether we're related to them or they're in our workforce or just part of our daily life for one reason or another. With those people, you just want to limit their time with you. That's the best advice that I could give, because the more time and energy you put into even giving, um, even saying, oh, they're annoying me or they're doing something wrong, that's more time and energy that is sucking away from something really positive that you could be doing. And I don't let it happen. The people that enrich me and enrich my life, I make lots of space and time for them. Those who don't, you get a very limited version of me. And that's just how it is.
It's so interesting that you mentioned this because I did something really similar. I don't know how many years ago, but I was sitting down in a cafe and I started to do what I now call friendship audit. And I went through some of my friendships now, just like reflecting on people in my life or people that I would consider close. And I started to see really similar patterns to what you explained is that I would be the one that is initiating, or we wouldn't really be that much in touch if I wasn't the one that is messaging, or a lot of times we would meet more like at their place or closer to them, and it was never even suggested, oh, maybe we meet at least somewhere in the middle,
Yeah.
or at your place, or somehow like shift it around where it was a lot of it felt like it was at their convenience. And it was really interesting because it also was really eye-opening because I realized, wow, there's actually very few relationships that I have that really feels like give and take, where we both give, but we also like we don't take where it's just like you have to give me. It's like because it's so authentic. And even like a few years ago when I moved here, that's when I experienced what real friendship is with my closest friend here, because there's really no conditions. And it's also, I find it really interesting that we are really different as like personalities, interests, lifestyles. But I think that's the beauty of it is that we don't try to change each other. It's about supporting the person with who they are and what they need from you, for them to be a better version of themselves, not them becoming like you, which I think a lot of times we might naturally assume that that might be the case because we think we're the best and we know everything. But I think a lot of it is that like being able to have empathy, have compassion, and try to understand like, is what I think is the best for you actually the best for you? Or actually maybe something else is better for you, and I want to support you in that. And but it is really interesting to and I think also one thing maybe you can talk on is I have noticed that a lot of times with the toxic people, not even toxic, level below that, like let's say, or above that, people who are not as or don't give us that much energy. They're not toxic necessarily, because I think with toxic people, it might be more clear that we need to have some space or engage less with them. But then there's that like middle ground of people that sometimes they give, but it's sometimes. And that's something that I noticed when I did my relationship audit. I was like, it's not that they don't give, but the ratio that we have is way off. But I'll be focused on, but they help me with this like one thing. So, and have you, or like what has been your experience with those kind of people? And do you have any advice to navigate those relationships?
Yeah, those kind of people aren't necessarily bad ones to kind of have in your space, right? They may not just be the high priority people. And I do always say that there is a season for different types of relationships and friendships with people, and things can ebb and flow based upon how busy we get in our lives, right? Or if something else is taking up a lot of our energy, we may also be one of those types of people to somebody else. So I would say, just naturally go with the flow of what you're feeling.
Mm,
You know, with any good relationship, it takes a long time to build it. It takes a long time to build not only a rapport with somebody, but an overall trust. So, for example, we just moved to a new area last summer, and I have spent a lot of this year just listening. And just, if I get invited to a space, oftentimes I'll go, but I am not the main spotlight whenever I get there. I'm doing a lot of listening. I'm picking up on a lot of cues. I'm understanding who people are because I'm giving them an opportunity to show me. And it's not necessarily a bad thing if they're not my people. It's just you you can kind of find who your people are in that falling out of knowing who your people aren't. And so I don't know, I do think that those types of relationships do have a space in our life, but maybe not one where we're just throwing ourselves and all of our energy, because then ultimately, right, you're going to be disappointed. And if you're, you know, maybe agreeing once every couple of months, having coffee with somebody like that, that's still going to be enriching. That's still going to be fun. It may just be just what that relationship needs, no more, no less.
Actually heard as you were speaking, I remembered like one entrepreneur talked about relationships, how I don't remember the time he said, whether it's like 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, but he said that to build like strong relationship with somebody, it takes those years. And he would ask himself, do I want to spend the next, let's say, 5 years with this person? Do I
Hmm.
want to have this person or have conversations with this person for the next 5 years of my life? And a lot of times that's where, like, when you put things in perspective, it can make it easier to see where they fit in your life or how close you want them to keep to yourself. Because I think in the moment, it's hard to have that perspective as you're in it
Right.
or
Oh,
as you're having that relationship. But it's something that relationships are so interesting to navigate because they're so important.
mhm.
They have huge effect on literally everything in our lives.
Sure. No, absolutely. It's definitely the circle that surrounds you that's going to either make life much easier for you or much more difficult. And knowing who those positive people are, I think of it almost like building a house, right? Like you start with the foundation. You want to start as strong as you can with the people in your life who you've known for the longest that you can trust the most, and that's your backbone. And then from there, you kind of build up and you can add, some relationships and some people may not be those supporting beams and walls, right? Like they might be an accent in the house or some kind of like accessory. And although they're very valuable in their own sense, they're not foundational, and that's okay. And you're also not going to be the foundational person for every single friendship or relationship that you have. It's just impossible. We don't have that kind of time or energy. So you're right. Like pick those people that you know that you can trust. And the best way to see that is what we do in our past and what we do in our present really dictates what's happening in the future. So if you're
Wow.
on the phone with a friend and all you hear is about how this person's annoying her, this person's doing her wrong, this person's, stealing off of her, this person said this person, guess what's going to happen when you get off of the phone with that friend? They're going to call up another friend. And guess who's going to be the topic of that conversation? It's going to be you. So you have to also think and play way between the lines because whenever people show up and they tell you who they are without necessarily doing things to you, you need to know that that is the type of person that they are. And if you're okay with that, or, if that's something that you like to ascribe to too, if you love the drama and the gossip, then that's great. But, listen whenever people show up and show you who they are for sure.
Yeah. I also wanted to talk on the creating your dream reality because
Yeah.
that is something that you mentioned that you have actually done. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's funny in my life, I never intended to do some of the most enriching and life-giving things that have happened to me have been almost in a way by accident. And I'm not saying that I didn't work hard because I work incredibly hard. I just didn't know looking into a crystal ball where my life would go to. And obviously, I talked about that pivotal moment with the federal government, but really what's kind of happened as a result of that fallout has been really transformational and wonderful for me. I've gotten an opportunity to learn so much about the social justice field. I had the opportunity to be a host on LA Talk Radio whenever we were living there, to be quoted in many major national newspapers for the work that I was doing at Get on the Bus. And then now, whenever we move back to the East Coast, being able to use the knowledge and the skill set that I have to be a grant writer, to help an organization to be able to supply services to people who kind of need those services most. And then, of course, on the whole book situation, I never knew, 20 years ago that I was going to write this book. Um, but I realized that this was the project that needed to happen because um, this story gave us so much life. The restaurant was more than just a restaurant. It was a sibling to me. It was the passion for my dad and for my family. And being able to relive those memories and to recount them and to enable that to be part of history has been a really wonderful thing. And kind of, what has happened because of this book has been incredibly amazing. Like now, I'm not a cook by trade. I'm just somebody who kind of grew up in an Italian family in a restaurant. Basically like watching a lot of behind the scenes, but I get the opportunity to cook all around the country in my cook and book experiences. And now we have the opportunity. We have reopened the restaurant as a pop-up restaurant a few times a year, which has enabled us to kind of stay in touch with a lot of our old customers, have just enough of a taste of the restaurant industry to know that we don't want to get back into it full time by any stretch of the imagination. The book now is prompting a potential documentary
Oh.
that is going to be on screen. So there's so many wonderful things. And then I was able to write a cookbook that we just learned is getting picked up now. So there's been so many wonderful mistakes that have sort of become the backbone of the fabric of who I am that I could have never imagined. And I'm so grateful for being able to be flexible enough to kind of go with the energy of what my own inner gut was feeling at the time and to embrace that because it's been such a wonderful ride. And anybody that is out there thinking about starting a business or writing a book or starting a podcast or doing something entrepreneurial or telling their story in a different way, I certainly encourage you to. Although, the odds are never with us necessarily whenever we go into these ventures. If you can bring that passion, if you can bring the excitement, if you know that you have something to share with the world, like you should be doing it. You need to be that yes in a sea of no for yourself, for sure.
What do you think is getting in people's way to act on those things or start to take that first step? Because I think a lot of times we have this sense of, oh, I would want to do this. And then the next thing is, no, but it's already like oversaturated market and da, 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 and then you have all the reasons not to do it. Um, what is it like? What have you seen is getting in the way, and what could help to overcome that and actually step into it and take the first steps?
Well, I mean, certainly an overwhelming venture, right? But honestly, I think the number one reason why people don't do things that they are meant to do or they are sought out to do is the fear of failure. And I
Mm.
can tell you right now that if you're afraid to fail, you will go nowhere. Most of my day is spent learning that I didn't get an opportunity. To this day, most of my day is spent with overcoming and being at peace with rejection. Whenever we went out with this book in particular, we went out to 265 literary agents. Out of those 265 literary agents, 140 just said straight up, thanks, but no thanks. 100 of them completely ghosted us and said nothing. So I don't even know if they got the project or they didn't even have the decency to say no to it. They just said nothing, which is, in my opinion, worse than a no. 17 people said yes, I'd like to see a little bit more, and only one literary agent decided to take us on. Same thing was true with publishers. When the literary agent went out to publishers, we were told things like we would never sit on the shelf with Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential and Stanley Tucci's Taste. We were a regional story at best. No one could relate. After this book came out, we were the #1 culinary memoir on all of Amazon for 2 weeks following the release. The #2 was Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential, and the #3 was Stanley Tucci's Taste. And I like to share that on just about anybody that will listen to that because I think it speaks volumes to the limitations that we sometimes put on ourselves, right? Like if I would have listened to all of the chatter in the background and said, oh, you know what? No, I'll never be as big as these people, or I don't really have a story to tell, or it's just regional. Nobody really wants to hear from me. If I would have done that, I would have never had this. And if I would have never had this, I would have never had everything else that's been happening in my life. And so I think to kind of see through that and understand that failure is part of the process. And if you don't get rejected, you are never going to succeed. So knowing that and being able to kind of sort through the weeds, I think will help people as they're thinking about taking some new steps or different paths in their lives. You know, it's scary, but you all have to jump at some point.
Yes, agree. Before I ask you the last question, can you share about the book, where people can find it, where people can connect with you outside of getting the book as well?
Absolutely. So the book is available really wherever books are sold. Certainly Amazon's probably the easiest, but if your local bookstore doesn't have it, they can certainly order it. How to connect with me, the best is just to go onto my website, which is Maria, Mariac, and then Palmer, Palmer.com. And all of my social media information and ways to connect with me are there. Under the events tab, we have everything that's upcoming and all of our photos and videos of all of our previous events. So if I could be of assistance at all to anybody out there, we do a lot of virtual events and book talks and that kind of stuff. So it doesn't really matter what location you are in. We are certainly happy to help and to figure out a way to collaborate. So yeah, we would love for you to give us a follow on social media or that's or a review on Amazon or Goodreads if you like the book. That is certainly a nice way to hug an independent author. I always tell people that.
I love it. So the last question I have for you is, what is one piece of wisdom you're still learning to live?
Oh gosh. I feel like there's so many pieces of wisdom that I'm still learning to live. Um, I think not getting ahead of grace. And what I mean by that piece of wisdom was imparted on me by my dear nun friend who started Get on the Bus. And I think that we are so quick, especially in the world that we live in with, these phones and technology and devices, we're so quick to want an answer. To go on to Google, to buy something on Amazon, to solve a problem, to call somebody immediately and to need an answer. And sometimes you have to percolate with things and you have to let them sit a little bit and you have to think about like, what is the right path? And being at peace with the fact that there might not just be one right way, and your right way might not be my right way. And I think that is always my biggest challenge is that I just want to get it done, right? And move on to the next thing. And sometimes in life, you can't get ahead of that grace. So whether it's taking a few deep breaths or saying, okay, let's put this one on the burner for right now. Let's think about it. Let's really think about, is this moving my own lifestyle or mission forward or not? And, being okay if that answer is not what you think others might want to hear, which is hard too.
Yeah, agree. Well, thank you for coming on, sharing your wisdom with the listeners and viewers. Definitely go check out Maria. And also, if any of you listening have 20 plus years of experience, you want to come on the podcast, there'll be in show notes also information how you can apply. We would love to have you on. And if you want to start a podcast, need help with managing your podcast, or want to get on more podcasts yourself, there's also going to be more information in the show notes. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next episode.